The ether trembles where the Eldari souls awaken, ancient echoes stirred by whispers of fate and flame. When a craft world falls silent, its spirit stones shattered and its dead stirring beneath the wraithbone, what remains is not simply memory, but the hunger of gods, the recoil of creation. Across a starless void, even the solace of death may yet betray us. If you stand at the edge of the webway and hear a voice in your shadow, know this: the Eldari did not just lose their empire, they never asked permission. If the key to their ruin lies buried within their souls, then the question is not what happens when those souls awaken, but what happens when they remember. The void hummed like a dying heartbeat. Across the endless black, the shattered craft world drifted, its once living wraithbone now a pale husk, webbed with fractures that glowed faintly with psychic bleed. Within its hollow corridors, the spirits whispered. Their voices were faint like wind through dry bones. Yet they carried sorrow older than most stars. Farseer Elindra walked alone through those empty halls, her rune armor faintly resonating with the ghosts that pressed close, unseen. The air here was thick with soul echoes. Every surface seemed to hum with the weight of countless dead. Her mind brushed theirs, gently at first, then deeper, until she felt the tremor of something vast stirring beneath the psychic crust. An awakening. She had come to the ruins to speak to the infinity circuit, the soul matrix of her dying craft world, and to seek guidance from those long gone. Yet as her hand touched the carved sigils of the spirit hall, she felt not peace, but hunger. The souls were not sleeping as they should have been. They were restless, angry. It began as a vibration beneath her palm, then spread like a shiver through her bones. The psychic chorus deepened, shifting from lamentation to a single coherent murmur, a thought not her own. "We remember." Elindra staggered back, breath catching. Never before had the dead spoken in such unity. She had heard the mutterings of individual souls, the fragmented echoes of warriors and artisans and dreamers. But this was different. It was as though the entire circuit had awoken as one being, countless consciousnesses bound in shared despair. She tried to pull away, but her spirit stone pulsed violently, tethering her to the circuit. Images flooded her mind, visions of the fall, the birth of She Who Thirsts, the screams of a civilization that had torn itself apart through ecstasy and arrogance. She saw the crimson flare of dead suns, the howling warp, the impossible shadow of a god born from their sins, and through it all the souls whispered, not in fear, but in accusation. "You left us to fade. You sealed us away to rot in silence." Her runes flickered erratically, falling from her grasp as psychic energy coursed through her. Her wraithbone staff cracked, spilling motes of pale light. Elindra dropped to her knees. The infinity circuit had become something else, no longer a sanctuary for the dead, but a prison boiling with consciousness. Something deep within it sought release. For a moment, she thought she saw shapes moving inside the wraithbone walls, faces pressing outward, mouths open in silent screams, eyes burning with amethyst fire. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. Elindra tried to sever the link, but the souls clung to her mind like drowning hands. Their agony poured into her thoughts until she could no longer tell where her memories ended and theirs began. "We are not gone," the voices said, 1,000 whispering in perfect unison. "We are awake," and in that instant, the entire craft world shuddered. Dim lights flickered to life across its surface, ancient systems sparking after millennia of slumber. Elindra rose unsteadily, staring out through the great observation arch. The void beyond shimmered, ripples spreading through the Imperium like the wake of a leviathan moving in unseen depths. Something was coming, something drawn to the psychic storm of awakening souls. The Farseer turned toward the heart of the craft world, the infinity core, where the glow of countless spirit stones pulsed like stars beneath glass. The dead had awoken, and they would not sleep again. Elindra did not remember how long she wandered after that moment. Time meant little inside the echoing silence of the dead. The infinity circuit pulsed beneath every step she took, whispering fragments of her name, her lineage, her failures. The craft world itself had become a mirror of her mind, cracked, luminous, and filled with ghosts. When she reached the core, she found it glowing with a terrible beauty. Thousands upon thousands of spirit stones floated in the air, suspended by psychic resonance. Each one contained a soul, some ancient beyond reckoning, others recent enough that their deaths still bled fresh pain into the ether. Together they formed a living storm of thought, memory, and anguish. She fell to her knees again, whispering the old words of communion. "I am Elindra of Lasethar. I come to seek the wisdom of those who came before." The light dimmed. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the voice came, not from one soul, but from many speaking as one. "Wisdom, you seek what we no longer have. You seek peace from the restless, purpose from the forgotten. There is none." Elindra's mind reeled under the weight of it. The souls did not speak as spirits of the honored dead, but as something else, merged, evolved, perhaps even corrupted. Their unity was unnatural, their tone stripped of individuality. "I can help you," she said softly, reaching toward the drifting stones. "I can ease your pain. You cannot ease what you created." A surge of psychic force threw her backward, her armor flaring against the impact. The wraithbone floor rippled like water, and from its surface, shapes began to emerge, translucent forms, half real, half dream. Warriors from ancient wars, their ghostly armor flickering like candlelight. Artists, seers, children, all of them staring through her with hollow eyes. Elindra rose slowly, her heart hammering. "What are you becoming?" The voices answered as one. "We are memory unbound. We are the echo of a dying race that refused to fade." The psychic field trembled violently. Cracks split the wraithbone walls, light pouring from within like blood from an open wound. Through it came visions. Cities burning beneath the birth scream of Slaanesh, the galaxy split by madness, the endless fall of the Eldar Empire. Each soul within the circuit relived its death in an infinite loop of guilt and remembrance, until their grief became a god of its own. And now, it wanted to live. Elindra clutched her staff, trying to channel the energy into focus. But the psychic current fought her, tearing through her mind in tidal waves of emotion. She saw flashes of herself in other lives. A poet on Bieltan, a child running through the crystalline forests of Iyanden, a warrior dying beneath an orc blade on a nameless world. The souls were consuming her memories, blending her identity with theirs. She screamed, but no sound escaped her throat. Only the silence of the infinity core answered, vibrating with the rhythm of countless heartbeats that no longer beat. And in that silence, something else stirred, a shadow that moved between the stones. It was not Eldar, not even a soul. It was older, vast, and waiting, a presence that did not belong within the circuit. The psychic storm bent around it, like reality itself was afraid to touch it. Elindra felt its gaze upon her, a gaze without eyes, without form, without mercy. It was the hunger that had devoured their empire, the eternal echo of she who thirsts, bleeding into the sanctuary of the dead. "No," she whispered. "You cannot enter here. This place is sacred." But the wraithbone pulsed in answer, and the soul screamed. The barrier was weakening. The dead had awakened, and the warp was listening. The psychic tremors did not go unnoticed. Across the drifting hull of the craft world, Ulsathar, runes flickered to life on dormant consoles, and the few remaining living souls stirred from their uneasy meditation. In the outer domes, Seer Kalir felt the first pulse of distortion ripple through the infinity circuit. It was faint at first, like the brush of cold wind against the skin of the soul, but it carried the scent of something that had not been felt since the fall. He opened his mind to the stream, seeking communion. For a moment, he tasted the voices of the dead, so many of them, tangled in a chorus of agony and half-formed prayer. Then, something vast and wrong turned its attention toward him. The psychic feedback hit him like a hammer. Blood poured from his nose, his soul stone flaring in warning as his body convulsed. The other seers rushed to him, but by the time they reached his side, Kalir was already speaking in a voice that was not his own. She calls from the wound. The gate is open. When his body went still, his spirit light was gone, snatched into the circuit. His soul stone cracked like ice under heat. Elindra felt it immediately. The moment his essence entered the circuit, the storm redoubled. The infinity core was no longer a chamber of containment. It was a battlefield. The awakened souls twisted and screamed, their energies coalescing into forms both angelic and monstrous. The wraithbone trembled beneath her feet, as though the craft world itself was beginning to remember its own death. Then, amid the maelstrom, she heard a new sound. Breathing. Heavy, mechanical, and alien to this place. Turning slowly, Alindra saw a massive silhouette approaching through the fractured light. Its armor gleamed with dull, gunmetal hues and carried the faint blue shimmer of imperial energy fields. It moved with the weight of inevitability, and its every step left a tremor in the psychic ground. An astartes. He did not belong here. His presence was a violation, and yet somehow the circuit did not reject him. The psychic storm bent around, his form as though unwilling to touch the mind that carried the will of a god. "Identify yourself," Alindra hissed, her mind reaching out to probe him, only to recoil from a wall of pure psychic scar tissue, pain, violence, faith, and rage. The warrior's voice rumbled through the chamber, deep as planetary tectonics. "I am Brother Sergeant Merrick of the Iron Heralds. We came upon this derelict by the Emperor's light. We sensed the corruption before we saw the stars around it die. This is not your domain, human." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the effort of maintaining control against the storm. "You should not be able to stand within this place." Merrick's gaze, glowing faintly through his helmet's optics, moved across the drifting spirit stones. "Your ghosts scream louder than any demon I have known. You think this is life?" His words struck deeper than any blade. For a moment, Alindra could not speak. She had always believed that the circuit was sacred, a salvation from the predations of she who thirsts. But hearing it from the mouth of a human, an instrument of brutality wrapped in faith, made her doubt. "This is our afterlife," she said finally. "Our only one. Without it, we are nothing." Then perhaps nothing is kinder. Before she could respond, the chamber erupted. A fracture tore open in the air above the core, a tear of violet fire and screaming wind. From within it came tendrils of darkness, shapes that writhed and shimmered, coalescing into silhouettes of impossible beauty and cruelty. Demons, birthed from the psychic residue of the dead. Their laughter filled the air like broken glass. Merrick raised his bolter, its machine spirit growling with hunger. "Then it seems your afterlife has teeth." Alindra's spirit flared, psychic energy crackling around her. "Then we die fighting for our dead." And for the first time since the fall, an Eldar and a space marine stood side by side, not as enemies but as two relics of dying civilizations, facing the horror of the warp as one. The chamber dissolved into chaos. The air inside the infinity core was alive with shrieking echoes and flaring light. The psychic membrane that once separated reality from the spirit realm now hung in tatters, bleeding raw warp energy into the material plane. Alindra felt it surge through her veins, liquid fire and memory, the agony of 1,000 trapped souls demanding release. Merrick's armor whined as his autosenses flared against the distortion. His vox grill sputtered, spitting fragments of prayers to the Emperor as his targeting reticle flickered and died. But the Marine did not falter. He moved with deliberate slowness, his bolter rising in perfect synchronization with the rhythm of his heartbeat. "By the throne," he muttered. "They are not demons as I know them." Indeed, what emerged from the rift were not the familiar grotesqueries of chaos. These entities wore the faces of the elder dead, perfect, sorrowful, and illuminated from within by the same psychic light that had once sustained them, each shape twisted through beauty and ruin, their forms shuddering between graceful flesh and molten crystal. "They are our ancestors," Alindra whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Or what's left of them." But as she watched, the illusion faltered. The radiant forms began to ripple, their features melting into masks of rage and despair. Eyes bloomed where none should be, and mouths gaped open to release voices that did not belong in the mortal world. Merrick fired. The bolter round struck the nearest apparition, detonating in a burst of sacred flame. The creature shrieked, its body splitting apart in a flare of silver light before reknitting itself from the surrounding energy. "They reform," he snarled. "They are bound to the circuit," Alindra said, summoning her witchblade. "You cannot kill what has no body." "But perhaps—" She closed her eyes and reached out, her mind diving deep into the circuit's chaos. "You can remind them what they once were." Her consciousness brushed against the storm. For an instant, she saw the entire craft world, the miles of empty chambers, the hollow domes filled with drifting dust, The gardens turned to ash. And through it all she heard them, the souls, lost and terrified, calling her name. Elindra. Why did you leave us? The question cut deeper than any psychic wound. Tears welled in her eyes, glowing faintly as the wraithbone responded to her sorrow. She reached out, not to command, but to comfort. You were never forgotten, she whispered. You were the reason we endured. Something shifted. One of the wraith shapes hesitated, its howling dimming into a faint hum. It reached toward her, trembling. But the rift pulsed again, and the warp's will reasserted itself, dragging the creature back into madness. Merrick's gauntlet shot forward, gripping her shoulder. Focus, witch! They are consuming you. His grip grounded her, dragging her back from the storm's edge. Her mind cleared, and with it came resolve. We cannot fight them here, she said. The circuit amplifies every thought, every emotion. We must reach the outer conduits. The core must be sealed from beyond. Merrick hesitated, his armor scorched by psychic flame, his faith the only barrier holding the immaterial at bay. Then lead. I will follow until the Emperor denies me breath. Together they turned toward the exit, but the way was gone. The architecture of the infinity circuit had folded in upon itself, reshaping like living bone. The corridor that once led outward now spiraled inward, deeper into the psychic labyrinth. Elindra realized the truth too late. The craft world knows we are here, she said quietly, and it does not want us to leave. The floor trembled, splintering beneath their feet. From below rose a massive construct, a wraith lord, its body forged from wraithbone, and its helm engraved with runes of the dead. Its eyes glowed with the same pale fire as the rift, and its blade hummed with psychic hunger. Elindra stepped forward, horror dawning. That soul, it was my mentor. The wraith lord raised its weapon. Then may he forgive you in whatever waits beyond, Merrick said, bringing his chainsword roaring to life. The chamber erupted once more in light and fury, as steel and spirit collided in the shadow of gods long dead. The Wraith Lord's blade came down like judgment. Its edge met Merrick's chainsword in a clash that sent ripples of kinetic force tearing through the chamber. Sparks of red and white fire streaked across the wraithbone floor as psychic backlash surged outward. Elindra was thrown back, her robes catching on jagged crystal, blood tracing fine lines across her cheek where shards had bitten deep. The Marine did not yield. Locked in the Wraith Lord's grasp, Merrick became a living bulwark of faith and steel. The spirit within the construct screamed in fractured echoes, its voice both ancient and familiar. Elindra's heart constricted, she knew that tone. It was once her teacher Phalion, who had guided her hand when she first learned to shape the warp's currents. But now his soul was chained by pain and madness, fed by the infinity circuit's broken rhythm. Merrick, she shouted. He doesn't know what he's doing. His essence is bound. The Marine grunted through clenched teeth. Then free him, witch, before he crushes us both. She pressed her palm to the wraithbone beneath her, closing her eyes. The psychic storm roared back into being, a tidal surge of light and despair. The chamber warped, expanding and collapsing at once, the air thick with static and the smell of ozone. Her thoughts brushed Phalion's imprisoned mind, and the shock nearly broke her. She saw the moment of his death, a chaos incursion. His wraithbone body torn apart, his soul flung into the circuit like ash in a storm. She felt his yearning, his endless hunger for silence that never came. And in that storm of emotion, one thread remained unbroken. Recognition, Elindra, her name faint as an echo of dawn. She seized it, anchoring her mind to it. Listen to me, she whispered, voice trembling as light flared through her veins. You are not a weapon. You are Phalion of the Spirit Choir. Remember who you were. The Wraith Lord hesitated mid-swing. The rune patterns across its armor flickered, dimming from red to gold. For an instant, Merrick saw the shimmer of clarity in its eyes. He hears you, he said, lowering his guard slightly. Then the rift pulsed again, and the whisper of the warp swept through the chamber like wind across a crypt. The light in Phalion's eyes flared crimson, and his blade rose once more. Elindra screamed as she felt the backlash tear through her mind. Merrick lunged forward, driving his chainsword deep into the construct's chest. The weapon bit through layers of wraithbone, screeching as psychic energy poured out like vaporized blood. The Wraith Lord's cry was almost human as it staggered back, its massive form convulsing. Forgive me, Elindra murmured. She reached out with both hands, channeling all the psychic energy she could muster. Her body arched with the strain as she redirected the current of the infinity circuit itself, forcing it through Phalian's spirit crystal. The result was instantaneous. The Wraithlord froze, every rune across its form igniting at once in a blinding flare. The light grew too intense to look upon. The entire chamber thrummed with resonance like a great bell tolling across the void. When the light faded, the construct stood motionless. Then, slowly, it lowered its blade and turned its gaze upon Elindra. "Thank you," the voice said, soft, weary, and free. The massive figure collapsed inward, its form disintegrating into silver dust that drifted upward, vanishing into the rift's light. Merrick stood in the silence that followed, his armor scorched and smoking, his breathing steady. "You risked damnation," he said quietly. "So did you," she replied. "Yet we are still here." He gave a single nod, perhaps the closest thing to reverence his kind could offer. "Then let us not waste the miracle." But Elindra's gaze was fixed on the rift. It was growing again, expanding in fractal spirals. From its depths came new voices, rising like a choir of the dead. Each one carried a memory, a plea, or a curse. And within that chorus, she sensed something else. A will vast and ancient, watching her through the fabric of reality. A shiver crawled down her spine. "The circuit is awake," she said. "But it is no longer ours." The ground trembled. Fissures tore through the wraithbone, revealing veins of molten psychic energy beneath. The light was blinding, the sound like a scream that had lasted 10,000 years. Elindra stumbled back, her fingers slipping on the melting floor. Merrick caught her by the arm and pulled her close as the craft world itself seemed to convulse. "What is it?" he shouted over the noise. Her voice was barely audible. "Something beneath the infinity core, something that should never have been touched." The words were drowned out as the floor shattered, and they plunged into the blazing void below. They fell through light and fire. Elindra could not tell where the void ended, and her mind began. Her body twisted in a stream of raw psychic energy, her thoughts peeling away like bark stripped by wind. Every memory of color and sound dissolved into static. And yet, somehow, she still felt the pull of gravity, the weight of another body colliding against hers, the clang of ceramite echoing in the storm. Then, silence. She opened her eyes to find herself lying on smooth, dark stone beneath a canopy of shifting light. It was not the chamber above. It was older, carved from obsidian and etched with runes that glowed faintly with spectral blue. Merrick stood a few meters away, his armor flickering with static discharge, his helmet half-dented, the aquila on his chest plate scorched black. He was breathing heavily, yet alive. Around them stretched a cavern so vast it defied geometry. The air shimmered with unreality, as if the space were caught between worlds. At the center loomed a great construct, half machine, half monument. Its base was a labyrinth of crystalline conduits pulsing with psychic light, and above them hung a suspended sphere of translucent gold, spinning slowly like a dying sun. "The core," Elindra whispered, her voice trembling. "We're inside the infinity core." Merrick turned, scanning their surroundings. "Then we're inside the heart of your god's tomb." She almost corrected him, but the words caught in her throat, because he was not wrong. The core pulsed like a living heart, each beat releasing ripples of thought that brushed across her mind. They weren't random echoes, they were whispers. Memories. I remember the stars. I remember the fall. I remember the fire. Elindra stumbled forward, her staff glowing faintly as she traced her hand along the runes carved into the floor. "These are not inscriptions," she said slowly. "They're imprints. Every Eldar soul that ever entered the circuit left something of itself here." Merrick's gaze remained cold. "And now they're awake." She nodded. The realization hit her like ice. The infinity circuit wasn't merely a resting place, it was a mind. A collective, ancient and wounded, and something had stirred it from slumber. The air rippled. The golden sphere at the chamber's center pulsed, its light bleeding through the stone. A low hum filled the space, resonating through their bones. Elindra fell to one knee as her mind was flooded with visions. Flashes of impossible vistas, dying suns, wraithbone cities burning across the void. She saw Eldar screaming in silent agony, their spirits torn between salvation and oblivion. When she came to, Merrick was standing over her, his weapon drawn. "Speak. What did you see?" Her lips quivered. "They're trying to warn us. Something's moving within the core, something that shouldn't exist." Before he could respond, the floor beneath them pulsed, and an image coalesced in the air above the golden sphere. It was not solid flesh or spirit. It was both, and neither. A towering shape formed from refracted light, tall and elegant, its face hidden behind a mask of mirrored glass. Its body shifted constantly, as though carved from flowing psychic energy. Alindra's breath caught. "A spirit archon," she whispered. "But they're myths." The entity tilted its head, and when it spoke, the sound was not a voice but a chord, harmonic and mournful, echoing across the chamber. "We are not myths, child of the seer path. We are what remains when the gods forget their own names." Merrick took a step forward, raising his bolter. "Speak plainly, Shade. What are you?" The spirit's head turned toward him, and the air shuddered. "You, human, are the rot that festers at the edge of the song. You carry the silence of the dead emperor in your veins. Do you hear it? The hollow hum of his golden machine?" Merrick's jaw tightened, but he did not fire. Alindra stepped between them, feeling the psychic pressure build like a storm around her. "If you're truly a guardian of this place, tell us. What has awakened the souls? What feeds this disturbance?" The entity's gaze flickered. "The rift you opened was not new. It was a wound long buried. We sealed it after the fall, but now it bleeds again. You, and those like you, have torn open the boundary." "Then help us close it," Elindra pleaded. The spirit's expression twisted, grief and rage flickering across its mirrored mask. "You do not understand. The wound cannot be closed. It hungers. It devours memory, identity, time. Every soul within the circuit is being consumed. Soon there will be no distinction between living and dead, only the echo of what was." The light grew harsher, the chamber trembling as the spirit's form began to distort. Alindra felt the psychic temperature spike, its emotions spiraling into chaos. "We were the shepherds," it cried, its voice now splintered. "Now we are the flock, and the wolf wears our skin." With a deafening crack, the golden sphere above them ruptured. The explosion did not sound like thunder. It was more like the breaking of glass inside her skull. Alindra fell backward as psychic force burst outward from the golden core, flooding the cavern in blinding light. The runes along the walls screamed. As the energy overloaded them, patterns twisting, melting into symbols she did not recognize. When the light finally died, the chamber was unrecognizable. The golden sphere had fractured, suspended fragments of its surface still orbiting each other in slow, mournful motion. Between them pulsed a vortex of pale fire, something alive and writhing, its surface rippling like liquid starlight. Merrick staggered to his feet. His armor was cracked, his visor flickering with static, but his grip on his weapon was steady. "What did you do?" Elindra's voice was hoarse. "I didn't." The core was already unstable. The Archon triggered it. He pointed toward the swirling light. "Then what's that?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth was crawling through her thoughts like a parasite. The entity that had spoken to them hadn't merely warned them. It had merged with the circuit. Its collapse had freed something that was never meant to have a body. A sound echoed through the cavern. It was like 1,000 whispers overlapping, forming something close to language but still not quite human, or Eldar. "We are the lost. We are the whole. We are the song forgotten." The vortex shifted, and from it stepped a figure that defied the logic of flesh. It was shaped like an Eldar, but its body was transparent, its bones gleaming with faint gold beneath layers of psychic mist. Its eyes were pits of cold light. The voice came from everywhere at once. "You call us dead," it said. "But what are the dead when memory burns brighter than flesh?" Merrick aimed his bolter, but Alindra raised her hand. "Don't," she whispered. "You'll only provoke it." He glanced at her, voice hard. "You think this thing can be reasoned with?" She hesitated. "No, but maybe it can remember." The spirit turned its gaze toward her. Remember, we remember too much. We remember how you're kind, you're fragile. Flickering lives feed the great machine that calls itself salvation. We remember how our gods were devoured. We remember the promise that all things would find peace in the circuit. And now, that promise has rotted. Elindra's knees trembled. If the souls have awakened, then maybe there's a way to restore them, to guide them back into the circuit before the spirit cut her off. Before what? Before you fade too? Before this light becomes the scream of your kind's extinction? Merrick stepped forward, his voice low. Enough riddles. Tell us what you are. The creature's form pulsed, its edges flickering like candle flame. We are what remains when grief learns to walk. We are the shadow of every soul that refused to sleep. The air around them grew dense, the psychic pressure suffocating. Elindra's skin burned where the spirit's gaze lingered. She felt her own soul being pulled toward it, threads of thought unraveling, her identity melting into the chorus that surrounded them. She saw flashes, millions of Eldar voices screaming through eternity, their minds fused into the architecture itself. She screamed and clutched her head, the psychic storm roaring inside her skull. Merrick caught her by the shoulder, dragging her backward as arcs of blue fire lashed out from the vortex. His armor sizzled under the assault, ceramite warping from the intensity. "Move!" he shouted. They stumbled toward the exit tunnel as the entire chamber began to collapse inward. Runes burst one by one, their stored energy bleeding into the storm. Behind them, the awakened spirit collective stretched its new form across the air, a wave of psychic mass folding upon itself. Elindra looked back one final time. The figure within the vortex had dissolved, replaced by 1,000 faces, each one half-formed, melting into the next. The voices merged into a single phrase, echoing across the dark. "We are awake, and we will not sleep again." The blast threw them into the tunnel, sealing the way behind them in a thunderclap of collapsing wraithbone. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, the slow rasp of exhaustion, the metallic wheeze of damaged armor. Merrick's voice was barely a whisper. "If that thing reaches the surface..." Elindra didn't answer. Her mind was still connected to the psychic resonance of the core, and through it, she could feel the ripple spreading outward. Through the craft world, through the webway, through the dreamscape where Eldar souls once rested. The awakening wasn't contained, it was spreading, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of what had been unleashed. The souls of the Eldar were no longer resting, they were remembering. The tunnels beneath the Infinity Core were older than anything Elindra had seen. The wraithbone here was not smooth or perfect, it was scarred, like something once alive that had endured centuries of silent agony. The walls pulsed faintly, echoing the psychic storm above, and every few steps the ground trembled with a slow, hollow rhythm, as though the craft world itself had begun to breathe again. Merrick's armor lights flickered weakly, illuminating fragments of ancient Eldar runes that twisted when she tried to focus on them. They no longer conveyed language, only feeling, grief, shame. Memory turned to stone. "How far down does this go?" he muttered. Elindra touched the wall with trembling fingers. "Deeper than it should. This place wasn't meant to exist anymore. It was sealed after the fall. Then why are we still descending?" Because whatever that thing was, it didn't just awaken the souls. It reactivated the dead layers of this craft world, the ones we tried to forget. A low hum reverberated through the passage, almost like chanting, but distorted, thousands of overlapping voices merging into one. Merrick raised his bolter instinctively. The sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere, flowing through the walls like water through veins. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a vast cathedral-like chamber. At its center lay a colossal shape, an ancient wraith construct, its limbs severed, its body half buried in dust and roots of hardened psychic matter. Its head was bowed, hands resting upon what looked like a broken weapon or a staff. It had once been magnificent. Now it was a monument to failure. Elindra stepped forward, drawn toward it as if by gravity. Her mind filled with whispers, echoes of forgotten prayers, names of heroes who never returned. "This was one of the first Wraith Lords," she said softly, "before they learned to shape the dead into proper shells. This one was built from entire souls fused together, A collective conscience made flesh. Merrick frowned.
And you think it's still alive?
Not alive, she whispered. Not exactly. The air around them shivered. The Wraith Lord's chest cavity cracked open with a sound like splintering glass, and inside burned a dim, pulsing light. The psychic field around them intensified until Merrick fell to one knee, clutching his head. Elindra's runes flared, fighting the pressure, but even she felt her consciousness slipping. Then, from the hollow shell, a voice spoke, not in words, but in overwhelming emotion. Grief, anger, betrayal. Why did you leave us to rot? Elindra staggered backward, her vision fracturing into light and shadow. It remembers. We died for the dream of unity, the voice continued. We fought the darkness you now call gods, and you entombed us, afraid of what we became. The spirit's presence filled the chamber, its projection taking form above the Wraith Lord, a towering, translucent figure of golden mist and shadow, its face shifting through countless identities. You sought to control death, it said, its voice resonating through bone and metal alike. Now death seeks to control you. Merrick struggled to his feet, his voice strained.
We don't even belong here.
Your war, your fall, it's not ours. The spirit turned its gaze upon him. And yet you are its child. You wear the armor of the Imperium, descendants of those who thrived upon our ruin. Do you think your emperor is free from what devoured us? The Space Marine took a step forward, defiance flaring despite his pain. Our emperor stands eternal. He is humanity's light. The spirit's laughter was a sound without joy.
Light? The same word we used before it burned us?
Elindra's voice trembled. If the souls awaken fully, the craft world will die. Its systems can't sustain that much psychic pressure. You'll destroy what remains of your kind. The apparition's eyes blazed brighter. Perhaps destruction is the only way to make the living remember what they buried. Elindra felt her control breaking. Her psychic wards flickered, her thoughts spilling into the psychic ocean of the dead. For an instant, she saw herself through their eyes. A single flame among billions, fragile and temporary. Then take me, she whispered. If you want the living to understand your pain, take me instead. The spirit's form wavered. Would you offer your soul so easily? Yes, she said, though her voice shook. If it stops this. For a heartbeat, the vast chamber went still. Then slowly, the light within the Wraith Lord dimmed. The air cooled, and the oppressive psychic weight began to ease, but the spirit did not vanish. It leaned closer, its voice soft now, almost human. You do not understand. Awakening is not a choice. Once memory stirs, it cannot sleep again. The projection faded, leaving only the hollow shell of the ancient construct. Elindra sank to her knees. Merrick approached carefully, his armor still humming from residual energy. Did it stop? She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was distant, fixed on the faint glow still pulsing inside the Wraith Lord's chest. No, she said at last. It just changed its shape. The void above the craft world was no longer silent. It pulsed with faint motes of light, fragments of soul energy drifting through the web of psychic currents like dying stars. From orbit, the vast structure looked wounded, its outer wraithbone hull cracking with luminous veins that stretched for kilometers, radiating from a single epicenter deep within the infinity core. Elindra watched it unfold through the observation dome, her reflection fragmented by the curved glass. Her skin looked pale, her eyes hollow, and her spirit felt thinner, stretched between two realities. The echoes of the ancient Wraith Lord still lingered in her mind, whispering through every thought like a shadow that refused to leave. Merrick stood beside her in silence, helm removed, his expression unreadable. Outside, the psychic storm shimmered like a Rory painted in despairing light. You said it changed its shape, he finally murmured. What does that mean? Elindra's voice was soft, almost fragile. It's no longer bound to a single body. The Wraith Lord's awakening wasn't an isolated incident. It was a signal. Every spirit stone on this craft world felt it. The dead have begun to remember they were once alive. Merrick turned his gaze toward the void, jaw tightening. You mean they're all waking up? Not all, she said. But enough. The infinity matrix has become unstable. The barrier between soul and machine is thinning. Soon, even the living will hear them. As if in answer, a low resonance echoed through the craft world, like the groaning of titanic metal under pressure. Elindra closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. The psychic field was in disarray, flowing like a river breaking through its banks. For a moment she caught glimpses of other souls, artisans, warriors, dreamers, all flickering in confusion, bound by memories that no longer matched the present. They're reliving the fall, she whispered. It's spreading through the webway links. The old grief is rewriting reality itself. Merrick took a step closer, voice low. Can you stop it? Elindra shook her head.
You can't stop a dream once it's shared by the dead.
You can only guide it. Merrick's gauntlet tightened around the railing. Then guide it fast, because if this thing keeps expanding, it'll tear your world apart, and anything near it. The words barely left his mouth before a shockwave rippled through the dome. A burst of psychic light flared from below, flooding the chamber with searing brilliance. Merrick pulled Elindra to cover as shards of glass rained around them. Alarms blared across every frequency, both mechanical and psychic. Through the broken dome, Elindra saw the impossible. Across the surface of the craft world, wraithbone towers began to move. They twisted and reformed, reshaping themselves as if sculpted by invisible hands. The entire structure was becoming organic, alive in a way it had never been meant to be. She stumbled forward, gripping the railing for support. The craft world is merging with them. The dead are rewriting its form. Below, spectral silhouettes flickered within the towers. Millions of faint figures walking, reaching, merging into the wraithbone itself. Some faces were calm, others screaming in endless repetition. Merrick's expression hardened. If this spreads to the webway, it'll infect other craft worlds, maybe even imperial systems. This isn't just awakening, it's contagion. Elindra turned to him, her gaze distant yet fierce. You think I don't know that? This is the curse of the Eldar. We built our world to house our dead, and now they want to live again. The wind howled through the fractured dome, carrying whispers that weren't wind at all, names, prayers, promises broken and remade. For a moment, Merrick thought he saw his own reflection among them, his armor rusted, his eyes hollow, his soul screaming for something long forgotten. Elindra gripped his arm, grounding him back to the present. We have one chance, she said. We must reach the heart matrix before it completes the transformation. If we can contain the resonance there, we might keep what's left of reality intact. Merrick nodded, sealing his helm again. Then we move. But if this turns, Farseer, and your dead reach into the warp, I'll end it myself. She didn't argue. There was no need. Both knew the weight of the promise. They turned from the dome and stepped into the corridor beyond, where the light had begun to flicker between living glow and spectral shimmer. The air was no longer air. It hummed, dense with souls brushing against matter, leaving trails of shimmering afterlight wherever they passed. As they walked, Elindra whispered a prayer, not to the gods she no longer trusted, but to the echoes that had once been her people. Stay with me, she murmured. Remember what we were before the fall? The response came faintly, drifting like a sigh through the corridor walls. We remember. For a moment, Elindra almost believed it was enough, but the walls began to breathe. The deeper they descended into the craft world, the less it resembled a place built by mortal hands. The corridors that once pulsed faintly with soft wraithbone light now glowed with shifting patterns of thought. The walls moved, not mechanically, but in rhythm with unseen heartbeats. Each pulse sent faint ripples through the air, making the light shimmer as if submerged in water. Elindra and Merrick moved through the strange metamorphosis, their footfalls muted by the psychic hum. Servitors lay frozen in the corners, eyes burning. With residual energy, their machine minds overwhelmed by spectral presence. Even the runes carved into the walls had begun to drift and rearrange, forming words that no longer belonged to the Eldar tongue. What are they saying? Merrick asked. His voice filtered through his vox. Elindra glanced at the glowing script, eyes narrowing. Their names. Every rune is a soul trying to be remembered. They passed a chamber that once housed the aspect warriors. Now their armor hung suspended in the air, moving gently as if worn by invisible bodies. The faint outline of spectral warriors flickered inside each suit, long-dead soldiers reanimating in ritual poses. Their spirit stones blazed bright crimson, pulsing in time with the walls. Merrick raised his bolter, but Elindra stopped him. Don't. They aren't hostile, yet. They're reenacting what they remember: battle, death, and glory that never truly ended. One of the wraith forms turned its head, as though sensing his presence. Its hollow gaze burned with recognition, and in a single horrifying instant, Merrick realized it wasn't looking at him. It was looking through him, as though searching for someone else buried deep within his armor. He felt a cold touch brush against his spirit, and a name, not his, echoed inside his skull. He tore himself free with a shudder, exhaling a curse. Elindra didn't meet his eyes. She was pale again, trembling. They're bleeding across memories. The dead no longer know who they are, or who we are. They pressed onward, following the psychic resonance that guided them like a beacon through the storm. The path led them into the heart of the Infinity Matrix, a great chasm of translucent bridges spanning a core of swirling energy. Thousands of spirit stones floated within the vortex, orbiting a central structure that pulsed like a living heart. It was there, suspended above the abyss, that Elindra felt the first surge of direct contact. A voice, not one, but 1,000, rose in unison inside her mind. The collective of the departed was no longer silent. It spoke with the gravity of worlds dying. We dreamed, Farseer. We dreamed of living again. Elindra dropped to one knee, clutching her temples. You can't, she whispered. Your place is within the Matrix. The living world can't bear your return. The voices shifted, layered upon each other like waves against stone. We built this world to escape the warp, and now the warp has come to us. We are not ghosts. We are what remains when the gods forget their children. Merrick watched as the vortex began to expand, light surging through the crystal conduits. Fractures spread through the bridges, and shards of spirit stones drifted upward, merging into one another. Farseer, he said, his tone hardening. You said we could contain this. Tell me how. Her hands trembled as she reached for her runes, casting them into the air. They hovered, orbiting her in spirals of firelight. There's a harmonic pattern hidden beneath the resonance, a core frequency that holds the souls together. If I can realign it, the awakening will stabilize. But if I fail... Merrick finished the thought grimly. They'll merge into the warp, and this entire world will go with them. She nodded once and then stepped forward onto the bridge, her feet leaving ripples of light in the air. Merrick followed close behind, his armor humming as the psychic field clawed at his spirit. The deeper they moved into the vortex, the more real the illusions became. He saw cities forming in the light, echoes of ancient Eldar civilizations that once spanned the stars. He saw laughter, temples, the first birth of pride and artistry before it all burned. The souls were not just awakening, they were recreating what was lost. Reality was bending to their memory. Elindra raised her staff, drawing the runes into alignment. The air thickened with psychic pressure, bending around her form like liquid glass. Hold the perimeter, she said. If they reach me before I finish, I'll lose the focus. Merrick took his stance, bolter ready. He didn't know what form the enemy would take, but he knew it was already here. From the swirling energy below, hands began to emerge, translucent, glowing, and endless. They clawed at the bridge, pulling themselves into existence. Some wore armor of impossible design. Others were naked, bodies of pure light and sorrow. They reached not to harm, but to touch, to remember. Merrick opened fire. Bolter rounds tore through the phantoms, but the souls reformed instantly, their outlines trembling before merging again. The psychic shock of each death screamed through the chamber, battering at Elindra's mind. She gritted her teeth, holding the pattern steady as her runes flared brighter, forming concentric rings of order against the chaos. Then a new voice cut through the storm, a deeper one, cold and commanding. It was not part of the chorus. It was something older, buried beneath the Infinity Matrix itself. You would cage eternity, Seer? You would bind us again? Elindra froze. The sound was vast, echoing through every part of her being. She looked into the vortex and saw a single colossal shape forming, a titanic figure of light and bone, crowned in fractured spirit stones, its eyes burning with the reflection of dying stars. Merrick's voice broke through the roar. What is that? Elindra's face was wet with tears.
It's not one soul, it's all of them.
The bridge shook violently as the figure rose higher, drawing the light toward itself, every soul on. The craft world screamed in unison, and the air became a storm of radiance. Elindra's runes scattered, and for a heartbeat she saw the impossible. The face of the dead collective, ancient, sorrowful, and furious, turned toward her. "If we cannot live," it said, "then neither shall you." The vortex screamed like a dying god. Every surface of the craft world trembled as though it were a living body caught between breath and collapse. Elindra staggered under the storm of psychic energy, her voice lost in the roar. Merrick tried to reach her, but gravity itself had begun to bend. The wraithbone beneath their feet pulsed like a heartbeat gone mad, its veins of light flickering between brilliance and shadow. The colossal form above them continued to take shape, its limbs woven from the spectral essence of 1,000 souls. Faces rippled across its surface, some peaceful, others twisted in eternal anguish. The air was filled with whispers that layered into shrieks. Each sound was a memory clawing to exist again. Elindra's mind blazed. The psychic tide threatened to crush her thoughts, to pull her consciousness into the mass of the dead. She could feel them, millions of Eldar voices, their grief, their desire, their hunger. They didn't want resurrection, not truly. They wanted release. Her staff glowed brighter as she focused her will. "You cannot hold this form," she cried into the chaos. "You are fragments of what was. You will destroy yourselves if you try to be whole." The giant answered with silence, then laughter, a sound so ancient and mournful that it split her concentration like a blade. "We are already destroyed," it said. "You left us to the stone and forgot our names. You built tombs of crystal and called them peace." Merrick steadied himself, planting his boots against the shifting floor. His armor's auspex overloaded with psychic interference, yet his instinct screamed that this was no mere apparition. He felt pressure behind his eyes, like invisible fingers prying at his skull. "Farseer," he growled through the vox. "Tell me this thing can die." Elindra's eyes flashed white. "Souls cannot die, but they can be silenced." She raised her staff, summoning her runes once more. This time, the symbols burned with an inner fire, golden at first, then bleeding into crimson as she drew upon her own life force. The storm thickened around her, energy spiraling inward, funneling into the core of the bridge. The spectral giant turned its gaze toward her, and the souls that composed its body screamed in defiance. Merrick's armor locked, servos whining as he struggled against the psychic current. The ghosts surged toward them, an ocean of translucent forms, hands reaching to drag them down. His bolter flared again and again, but each shell only scattered light. He switched to his blade, slicing through spectral limbs that reformed seconds later. "Elindra, whatever you're doing, do it faster." She didn't answer. Her voice was gone, replaced by a soundless chant that reverberated directly through thought. The runes aligned into a perfect circle, and the vortex began to collapse inward. The colossal being recoiled, its structure shuddering as threads of light snapped like tendons under strain. Its voice broke into static fragments. "You cannot unmake us. We are memory. We are the echo of gods." "Then fade," she whispered, as echoes must. With that final word, the runes ignited. A surge of golden light erupted from the center, pure and blinding. Merrick was thrown backward, tumbling across the bridge as everything dissolved into brilliance. He felt himself falling, then floating, then nothing at all. When he opened his eyes again, silence ruled. The vortex was gone. The chasm lay dark and still, its heart dimmed to a pale pulse. The air was heavy but no longer alive with screaming thought. The spectral figure had vanished, leaving only drifting fragments of shattered spirit stones suspended in the void. Elindra knelt at the center of the bridge, motionless. He approached slowly, wary of what might remain. Her armor was cracked, her runes extinguished. Yet her eyes glowed faintly with residual psychic fire. "Farseer," he said quietly. Her lips moved, barely audible. "They're not gone. Only dreaming again." Merrick glanced into the abyss below. For a moment, he thought he saw faint outlines of figures still moving, slowly, like currents beneath ice. Then they faded, leaving only the soft thrum of wraithbone. He exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath since the storm began. "Then it's over." Elindra didn't look up. "Nothing is ever over," she said. "Not for us. The souls will sleep, but their dreams will spread. They've tasted consciousness again. Next time..." She trailed off, her voice breaking. Next time, they may not ask permission. The craft world moaned around them, a deep, aching resonance that sounded almost like mourning. Merrick turned toward the exit tunnel, his armor scorched and dented, his weapon nearly empty. He had fought demons, mutants, horrors of the void, but nothing like this. Nothing so quiet. "Let's get out of here," he muttered. Elindra rose slowly, leaning on her staff. Her shadow stretched long behind her, flickering with phantom light. "You can leave," she said softly. "But I can't. What do you mean?" She turned her gaze to the faint glow of the abyss. "A part of me stayed behind. I can still hear them calling." And in that moment, Merrick understood the cost. She had given more than power to silence the awakening. She had anchored her own essence within the matrix, binding it to the souls to keep them dormant. He wanted to protest, to drag her away, but the look in her eyes silenced him. "Go," she said, "before they remember my name." He hesitated only a heartbeat, then turned and began the long climb back to the upper decks. The echo of her staff tapping against the bridge followed him like a heartbeat, fading slowly into distance. Behind him, the abyss glimmered once more, faint ripples spreading across the surface of the wraithbone heart. And if one listened closely, beneath the hum of the machinery and the whisper of psychic winds, one could almost hear the sound of 1,000 voices murmuring her name in gratitude or warning. The days that followed were not measured by light or shadow, for within the depths of the craft world, time moved as it pleased. Merrick wandered through its hollow corridors, his boots echoing against the wraithbone that had grown silent. Once the walls pulsed faintly with psychic breath, alive with the dreams of 1,000 Eldar. Now they were cold, inert, like ribs stripped of life. The silence pressed upon him with an almost physical weight, heavy and expectant. He tried to contact Elindra again, but the vox returned only static. The tech adepts had no explanation. The interference was gone, the psychic storm dispersed, yet every frequency that should have reached her returned nothing but faint whispering, like wind across ancient ruins. He told himself she had survived, that she was meditating somewhere deep within the infinity circuit, tending to the wounds of her people. But the truth gnawed at him. He had seen her eyes when she spoke that final word. He had heard what she didn't say. As he walked, he passed the remnants of the Wraith Guard, silent guardians that had powered down after the storm. Their once glowing runes now dulled to gray, their bodies frozen mid-motion. He paused before one, its faceplate cracked to reveal the shimmering fragments of the spirit stone within. The faintest light still flickered inside, like the last ember of a dying flame. Merrick stared, unsure if it was mercy or cruelty that kept it glowing still. He turned toward the central dome, a vast chamber that once housed the infinity circuit's primary conduits. There, among the silent wraithbone pillars, a low hum persisted. Not the mechanical vibration of a functioning system, but something deeper, stranger. It sounded almost organic. When he reached the dais, he found it, a single crystalline shard suspended in air, pulsing softly. The shard was fractured, and through its cracks bled golden light, the same hue that had filled the bridge during Elindra's final act. It hovered just above the surface of a blackened pedestal, rotating slowly, whispering to itself in a dozen voices. Merrick's gauntleted hand hovered near it. The whispers grew louder, clearer, shaping words not meant for mortal comprehension. He stepped back instinctively, his armor sensors detecting low-level psychic radiation. But beneath the warning tones, there was something else. His name, spoken in her voice, Merrick. The air thickened. The shard pulsed once more, and an image flickered across its surface. A faint silhouette, robed and luminous. Elindra's form shimmered, half there like light caught in water. Her expression was calm, but her eyes glowed with the soft melancholy of one who had seen too much. "You stayed," he murmured. Her projection inclined its head. "I could not leave. The souls are restless but contained. They dream in circles now, endless, quiet patterns. But they know I am here." "You're not alive," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am where I must be," she replied, her voice echoing faintly from within the shard. The dead needed a mind to anchor them, to remind them of who they were. Without that, they would drift back toward the warp. I became that anchor. Merrick clenched his fists. "You traded your life for theirs." "I traded time," she corrected gently. a mortal measure of it. My consciousness is bound but not lost. I see through their dreams now. I walk their forgotten worlds. I remember what they were before the fall. He took a step closer. And what do you see? Her image flickered, and for a moment, her tone changed. No longer that of a seer, but of someone standing at the edge of revelation. I see that the dead are not silent. Not truly. Every soul is a note in the same vast song. When one awakens, the melody shifts. That is what happened here. A chord was struck, one that echoes still. He didn't understand, not fully, but he could feel the truth in her words. The psychic weight in the air, the faint hum in the wraith bone, it was not death. It was anticipation. Something vast had stirred, and though subdued, it was not content to sleep forever. Will they awaken again? He asked, her eyes softened. Everything awakens in time, even stars. He stood in silence, the distant hum resonating through his armor. The galaxy beyond was endless war, endless loss. Yet here, within this tomb of light, he felt something different. Not peace exactly, but continuity. A reminder that even the broken remain part of something infinite. The image of Alindra began to fade. He reached out, as if to hold her there, but his hand passed through empty air. Alindra, he whispered. Her final words lingered as she vanished into the light. Do not mourn the dead, Merrick. Mourn the silence between their songs. The shard dimmed, and the hum receded, leaving only the faint glow of the infinity circuit beneath his feet. Merrick stood there for a long time, until the sound of distant engines signaled that the ship would soon depart. As he turned to leave, a faint pulse rippled through the chamber, a single beat of light, quick and alive, like the flicker of an awakening heart.